Foreword. Embracing life's duality has led me on a profound journey of self-discovery, seeking the delicate balance between conditioned beliefs and authentic truth. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a web of misconceptions and lies that often dictate our actions and perceptions. I realized how others can inadvertently hinder our growth, stifling our natural talents and abilities with their opinions and expectations. This book is not a claim to have all the answers, but rather an invitation to explore powerful insights and fresh perspectives on life and love. Through these pages, I aim to reveal the hidden potential within you, and offer a positive, empowering way of embracing life's challenges. My motivation for writing this book stems from a deep love for humanity. We are all reflections of each other. My personal experiences have been instrumental in shaping this work, and I feel compelled to share it with others, knowing that we all need these insights. So, join me on this transformative journey, and together, let's unlock the true potential that lies within each and every one of us. Introduction. This book serves as an antidote to some of the problems that we often face in life, addressing the core roots of these issues, particularly in life and in romantic relationships. By exploring and challenging the conditioned patterns and beliefs that underlie many of life's struggles, readers can gain a deeper understanding of themselves and others, and develop 4. More authentic, empathetic, and fulfilling connections. The book delves into the impact of societal expectations, past experiences, and emotional intelligence on relationships, and offers practical advice and strategies for navigating common challenges. Through a thoughtful and insightful exploration of these topics, readers can break free from toxic patterns, cultivate self-awareness and self-love, and foster healthier, more meaningful relationships that bring joy and fulfillment to their lives. As you read through these pages, you'll begin to see the world in a new light, much like Neo's awakening in The Matrix. The illusions and misconceptions that once clouded your perception will start to dissolve, revealing a brighter, more empowering truth. You'll gain insight into the ways in which societal conditioning, past experiences, and limiting beliefs have shaped your relationships and overall outlook on life. With this newfound understanding, you'll be able to break free from the restrictive patterns that have held you back, and embrace a more authentic, compassionate, and fulfilling way of living. You'll discover that love and relationships can be a source of joy, growth, and transformation, rather than pain and struggle. And as you integrate these truths into your daily life, you'll find yourself living a more purposeful, meaningful, and awakened existence. It all starts with you, as the foundational truth that sets the stage for transformation. You are the master of your own happiness, the captain of your own soul. No one else can give you the joy, love, or fulfillment you seek. It must be cultivated from within. This book will guide you on a journey of self-discovery, empowering you to unlock the doors to your own inner strength, wisdom, and love. You'll learn to recognize that the power to create the life you desire lies within your own hands, and that you hold the key to unlocking every experience you wish to have. By embracing this truth, you'll break free from the cycle of seeking validation and happiness outside of yourself, and instead, become the source of your own joy, love, and fulfillment. This book empowers you to challenge the status quo and break free from the constraints of societal norms and limiting beliefs. You have the autonomy to question and reject the narratives that others impose upon you, and to forge your own path. Within these pages, you'll discover the transformative power of critical thinking and self-reflection, allowing you to discern truth from fiction and make informed decisions that align with your values and aspirations. By reclaiming your agency and asserting your individuality, you'll unlock the freedom to create a life that truly reflects your authentic self. Unlock your power to challenge the norms and create your own truth. This book will guide you in breaking free from limiting beliefs and societal expectations, empowering you to forge a path that authentically reflects your values and aspirations. 5. Chapter 1. Home I. We each have a persona and ego, a false self and a mental idea of who we think we are. We identify as this physical form or this body, which includes ethnicity, biological sex, whether or not considered attractive or unattractive, whether the body is weak or strong, and so on. We identify with name, with nationality, political party, religion, or philosophy. We might also identify with our position in a family or in the society, with our status, with our career, our hobbies and interests, our skills and talents. We may identify with a particular style of fashion with a culture or a clique or community. We may also identify with certain personality traits, characteristics, virtues, strengths, weaknesses, addictions and other mental and emotional afflictions. In addition to these identifications, we may have several beliefs about ourselves, typically about how valuable we are, whether we are worthy or lovable, whether we are smart, capable or incapable, good or bad and so on. These conscious beliefs may be rooted in our unconscious beliefs, which are based on cultural conditioning, in relationship experiences particularly during our childhood, our relationship with our parents, teachers and other figures of authority. The way we were raised and how we were treated or spoken to, whether we were given enough attention or neglected, encouraged or discouraged, valued or undervalued. And all these things, these identifications and unconscious beliefs, when combined all together, they create in our mind an image of who we are, or rather who we think we are. But it's only a concept, a mental construct, an idea, an interpretation, essentially an illusion, because it's not who we really are. So, who are we really? Our entire 5, 6 lives other people have been telling us who we are. Our parents, our priests, our teachers, our peers, the whole society has been telling us who we are, and we tend to believe it. We make that a part of our personal identity. But maybe you are now beginning to realize that those ideas and identifications don't really define you. That who you are is not confined to whatever labels and limitations others have placed upon you. Maybe you find yourself no longer satisfied with those answers. So would you find yourself satisfied with any answer that I give you and that anyone else gave you for that matter? It's not really my concern that you wouldn't be satisfied, but rather that you might be, and I will explain what I mean by that. Most of us, when we begin to question our identity, when we've begun to lose that sense of who we are, based on these social conditionings, ideas and so on, we begin to ask ourselves with real sincerity, who am I? Who am I really? And this might be the most important question that we can ever think to ask ourselves, and from there we might start to go a little further seeking for the answers. And there are so many spiritual sources and teachers who will confirm to us that we are not the body, that we are not these various superficial identifications, that all of this is the false self or ego, and who we are really is the spirit soul, that we are multidimensional spiritual beings having a temporal human experience. We are the universe experiencing itself through this limited physical form. There are several ways that this is expressed or explained to us regarding our identity, our divine or spiritual nature, and not to say that any of it is true or not. But when we accept that without action but realizing it for ourselves, we are accepting another idea, a belief or a concept, and a concept is not a reality. In fact, a concept can be easily misunderstood or misinterpreted. Our understanding is limited to our experience, so anything which is beyond our experience we can't properly understand. So, when someone is explaining something beyond our experience, we tend to interpret it according to our limited experiences, which is to say that we don't entirely understand it. So, it's not enough to have someone else's explanation. It can be helpful and point us in the right direction, but we must find out for ourselves. So, even when someone tells us who we are, even in terms of our spiritual nature, this idea or identity can become another trap. We have this desire to know ourselves, and everyone has it, but most of our lives we've been looking to others to give us the answers, and we may find ourselves no longer satisfied with the answers we've been given so far. So we turn to spirituality, and that's when someone else tells us who we really are, that who we are is spirit, a spiritual being, an expression of the divine and what have you, and we might be satisfied with that answer, but what that really means is that the intellect is satisfied with another concept of who we are, because again, until we realize that for ourselves it's just a concept, an idea, and if we find ourselves satisfied with that concept, then what we do is stop trying to find out. We accept the answer that we are given and we look no further into it, and it may be actually a convenient excuse for us to avoid going deep within and realizing it ourselves. 6. 7. Who or what we really are is covered over by this false self or ego, which is an illusion of who we are, and within that illusory self there may be some things which are deeply unsettling and uncomfortable to look at. There may be fear and insecurity, various tremors and so on, and all of these can create some resistance and avoid going deep because we don't want to feel any of that. So again, who we truly are is covered over by the false self, and if we really want to discover that, we must transcend the illusion of the false self, and the only way to do that is to face it, to go into it. The only way out, or in this case, is through. We must face the illusion in order to see through it, we must look at it. But for most of us there's always this resistance to looking at it because again we are resisting all the discomforts we might find there. We may have a great deal of fear and naturally we are afraid to face that fear. But all that fear and discomfort is coming from the false self, which means even that is illusory. But despite being illusory, it can feel very real, and there may also be somewhere in all of it the fear of losing oneself, because even if we understand intellectually that we are not the false self, deeper than that, deep in the unconscious regions of the mind we still believe that's who we are. So that sense of identity can be so strong and so deeply rooted that we are afraid to lose it. As illusory as it may be, it offers us a sense of comfort. There's comfort in knowing who you are even if it's just an illusion. The sense of not knowing who you are can be very disturbing to the mind, so to lose that identity means to face the discomfort of not knowing. To transcend the false self sounds very intriguing, but if the false self is still deeply identified with that, then this can also seem very frightening because we are so identified with that. Why imagine that if we destroy it, we are destroying ourselves? So, these create a lot of resistance to self-inquiry, to go within and examine our illusions. So, if someone else can tell us who we really are, that we are ultimately divine spirits or what have you, that might save us from the trouble of having to go through all the fears and discomforts of having to find out for ourselves. We can just accept that answer and be done with it without questioning it, but we are not really done with it, we've just stopped looking. What we are afraid of is this illusion that we might disappear, that we might cease to exist. But it's not the dissolution of the true self, the fear of dissolution comes from the false self. The ego is a ghost that is afraid of dying. I think this explains it very well. Imagine a ghost being afraid of dying, it's ridiculous. Because there is no death for that which is not alive, and that which is illusory cannot be destroyed because it has no reality, but it only appears to be real. So, all the fear of dissolving or being destroyed is also illusory. So, for you to know who you are, you have to seize through the illusion, you have to walk into the mirage to realize it's just a mirage, and until you actually do that you can't really know for certain, you can't be sure whether it's real or not, so you have to face that and go into it to look at it, examine it and come to understand it directly. We didn't discover who we are by accepting some answer from someone else, no matter how logical or profound it may seem. We discover who we are by first recognizing who we are not, so we begin with the question, who am I? And then we look at that which we think is the idea of 7. 8. Who we are, and piece by piece we peel back the layers. Am I this body? But the body changes and every cell of the body dies and gets replaced over a period of 7 years. This means that the body I'm in right now did not exist as such 7 years ago. Every cell has changed, and yet I have been the witness to this transformation, and the one who has witnessed the transformation has not changed, so the answer is no, I'm not this body. Amy, American, South African. This is just some obituary identification based upon where I was born and where I now live, and I can move anywhere and assume some other nationality, so this is not who I am. Am I a Christian, Hindu or an atheist? These are belief systems and beliefs can change. I can convert from one religion to the other or abandon them altogether, so that's not who I am. Am I this mind which is composed of thoughts and emotions? Thoughts and emotions are transient, they come and go, constantly changing, and yet I remain as the one who experiences, witnesses and watches them, so that also means that this is not who I am. At this point it is not for me to decide for you about who you are. To be totally satisfied with any idea of how you identify yourself, you have to first face the challenges of going deep within to find out for yourself. Chapter 2. Limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are the beliefs that inhibit us from living freely and authentically. These turn out to be beliefs in regard to our abilities, what we are capable or incapable of, or they may be beliefs in regard to our intrinsic worth, our value as a person, and these may be beliefs which we are well aware of, or they may be subconscious beliefs, meaning that we are not so very much aware of them, and yet they still influence our lives in many ways. 8. 9. It's often these beliefs which prevents us from living the life that we feel inspired to live. They can influence our relationships, our career, and often in a way that causes a great deal of dissatisfaction and suffering. In some cases they can even be destructive, and also inhibit our personal growth, standing in a way of transforming the way we think and feel. In other words, they can prevent us from living happily and simply enjoying life. There are many ways in which these beliefs can constrain us, keeping us trapped in unhealthy habits or harmful and destructive behaviors or negative thought patterns and emotional distress. But if we want to be free from these, we firstly need to address these limiting beliefs which underlie there. Now, probably the most common limiting belief is simply the idea that you are intrinsically flawed or broken or inadequate. The sense that you are not in control of your own life, and indeed the fact that you are not enough in some regard. But where does this belief come from? Perhaps you had a parent who was constantly disapproving or was always disappointed, and you were used to set a very high standard that you had to struggle to live up to. And so, you might go your entire life with this belief that in some way you simply aren't good enough. You might believe that you are stupid or clumsy, or that you can't do anything right, or perhaps someone told you that you were bad, and you've believed it, and so you feel as if you're powerless to do anything about it. And, as long as you believe that you are bad and incapable of doing good, you go on doing things which are considered bad, like stealing, hurting others, or what have you. And no matter how many times someone rebukes you for it, and no matter how much you might feel ashamed of yourself, you also feel there's nothing you can do about it. It's who you are, so you accept it as your truth, and you believe it. Or perhaps you have some inclination to express yourself creatively through music, writing, or some other artistic forms, but somewhere along the way you came to believe that you aren't very talented, or perhaps you came to believe that creative expression is an unacceptable way to live one's life, that you should at least be devoting your energy to something more practical or more lucrative or more respectable, like becoming a doctor or lawyer. And so you never develop your talent or simply don't share it with others, and you go your whole life feeling unhappy because deep down you want to express yourself in this way. But you have some beliefs which keep getting in the way of it, and there can be any number of limiting beliefs. I'll never be good enough, I'll never be happy, I'll never be loved, and I'll never be able to do this and that. I'm stupid, I'm clumsy and unlikable. Whatever the case may be, for as long as you believe it, it turns out to confirm itself. For example, let's suppose that you are holding the belief that you aren't worthy of being loved, so you find yourself out in a world meeting potential partners, and occasionally you meet someone who is genuinely kind and loving. But subconsciously you believe that you aren't worthy of that person's love, and so you reject them or sabotage the relationship. Now on the surface you might come up with some other excuse, some other rationalization. You might even say that you just don't think that they are compatible, or maybe you say it's because of what they do for a living or some other trivial reason. But deep down the real reason is that 9, 10. You know that this person will treat you with so much love and respect, and you just don't believe that you deserve it. And so instead you look for someone who is going to treat you the way that you believe you deserve to be treated. You look for someone who seems to be a bit more self-absorbed and inconsiderate, and of course they end up treating you very much unloving in the relationship, which confirms the belief that you have about yourself. So, you see how these beliefs are not only very limiting, but how we may even go out of our way to confirm them to prove to us that they are true. And we can cause all kinds of suffering, drama, problems and disappointments for ourselves. How to overcome and let go of limiting beliefs. We can start by observing them as they present themselves to us, and then question them, examine the ways in which they stand in our way or cause us to suffer. We can at the very least come to recognize them as beliefs, which means we recognize that they aren't necessarily true, or rather that they are just assumptions, speculations and false interpretations. And if we want to know the truth, we need to be able to suspend our beliefs, to be willing to let go of them, or at least to loosen our grip a little and not to hold on to them too tightly. We have to recognize that our beliefs are nothing more than false identities that we can only place upon ourselves. No matter how well-founded they may seem, there can be certainties that can prove that our beliefs might be wrong. If we are uncertain as to what these beliefs may be, we can then work our way backwards, beginning with the situation or the emotions that we might be feeling at any given time. For instance, if we find ourselves doing the same unhealthy behavioral patterns repeatedly, or making the same poor choices, or perhaps finding ourselves wanting to do something but not feeling that we are capable of it. We might also notice how we feel in those moments. We might feel discouraged, disempowered, frustrated, inadequate or unworthy. And whatever it happens to be, if we can explore that feeling, if we can go into it and see what's behind it, that's where you find it. Somewhere underneath that feeling there's some belief that we have about ourselves. So, we look at that, we recognize it, we acknowledge it, but at the same time we let go of the assumption that it's true. We might ask ourselves why we believe it. Where did that belief come from? Was it something that someone else said perhaps, and if so, why did we believe it? Often the beliefs that we have about ourselves are simply some other person's opinion that we have adopted as our own. Someone might have told us that we were stupid, ugly or untalented or whatever it happens to be, and for whatever reason we believed it. But oftentimes people say mean things to us because they are just unhappy. In that moment they may be frustrated with life and so every little thing irritates them. They might just be looking for someone to take their frustrations out on, and it just happens to be us, or perhaps they don't feel very good about themselves, and it gives them some kind of relief to insult others. 10. 11. But whatever the case may be, we don't tend to consider these things. Instead we just assume that what they are telling us is true, and we can end up carrying the belief with us all throughout our lives. Or it may be that someone simply gave us a look of disapproval, or maybe we were punished for something that was quite innocent, or perhaps we were punished for something which wasn't so innocent. Maybe we did do something unkind or inappropriate. Often, especially when we are young, we can find it difficult to distinguish between our true selves and our behavior, and what I mean is that our behavior may be wrong, but we tend to internalize this as if there is something intrinsically wrong with us at the very core of our being, and this is especially the case if we are being punished for our behavior. But the thing about behavior is that it's never consistent. We can be kind in one moment and cruel in the next, which is to say that our behavior doesn't define us, but we are capable of both kindness and cruelty. But when we make the mistake of defining ourselves by some particular behavior, we tend to get stuck in those behavioral patterns. For example, if we do something wrong and allow that to define us, then we find it very difficult to do the right thing. If we believe that we are intrinsically bad, then we believe that all we are capable of is bad behavior, so that's what we do. We behave badly simply because we believe that we are incapable of behaving any other way. Or perhaps when you were young you wanted to do something, and perhaps it was something that you had never really tried before, and perhaps someone told you that you were doing it wrong, and perhaps you were, and maybe there were many times when you were told these, and maybe someone even told you that you can't do anything right and you believed it. But understand that all of these that you were trying to do are things that you had never done before, and some things just takes time to learn. They take practice, they take making a lot of mistakes before you get good at it. And maybe you just never took the time to improve upon it. Instead, you accepted the belief that you just aren't capable of it and that nothing you do is ever good enough, and so you never give anything a proper attention, or perhaps you give up too quickly when things become difficult, and so you never improved upon it, which seems to confirm the belief that you aren't very good at anything. But what if you told yourself it takes time? What if you were more patient with yourself? What if you understood that it takes consistency and a certain number of mistakes before you actually get it right? They say practice makes perfect, and that's just how we all learn and improve upon our skills, by making mistakes and learning from them. Reality is that we are capable of so many things. It's just our beliefs limiting us and disempowering us, and indeed inhibiting us from discovering our true potential. If we believe we can't do something, then we won't, and so if we believe we can, then we will. Awakening discernments. I would encourage you to re-examine these beliefs, to re-examine where they came from and the circumstances surrounding them, and I would encourage you to challenge them, to do the things you believed you cannot do. And don't expect you'll be proficient at it right away. If it is 11, 12, some skill or talent or habit that you've neglected all your life, it may take some time to develop and refine, so don't be so hard on yourself, be patient and don't give in. Give yourself time to improve. Be willing to get it wrong a few times, be willing to make a few mistakes along the way. And whenever you make a mistake, you just learn from it, and each time you get better and better at it. The more you practice anything, the more effortless and natural it becomes, but it's almost always difficult in the beginning, no matter who you are. But as we begin to let go of these beliefs, we begin to discover so much more of our potential. We begin to live in a way that is much more authentic or expansive and much more liberating and fulfilling, and from that we discover a great deal of joy. It's like turning the page to an unwritten chapter filled with endless possibilities. Chapter 3. The Illusions of Love. In my search for answers, I came across a great deal of scientific literature on neurochemicals in the brain. I came to understand the biological nature of physical attraction, sexual arousal, and pair bonding. I came to understand that during these interactions, the brain releases several chemicals that cause us to feel euphoric urges, not only to procreate but to remain with our partner for a particular length of time. And what I concluded from all of this was that love is nothing more than a biological function of the brain, a chemical cocktail, and a temporary one. Now, do I still believe this? Not quite, and I'm not suggesting that the science isn't accurate. It's very precise and it does explain a lot about why we feel the way we feel when we begin engaging with a new partner, and it does reveal that much of what we feel is transitory and misleading and that we are experiencing a high as a result of these neurochemical reactions. In fact, some of the chemicals involved in this process are the same ones that are triggered by 12, 13, cocaine and meth. And just as a drug addict experiences a certain degree of withdrawal, so does the love addict in the form of melancholy and loneliness. What I've come to understand in the years since is that these scientific findings don't really explain anything at all about love, because love is something entirely different. What these findings pertain to are feelings of attraction, arousal, and infatuation, which unfortunately we tend to mistake for love. And it's because we confuse these feelings with love that we rarely truly experience it. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with these feelings. They are perfectly natural after all and very much necessary for the survival of our species, but it is important to understand them and to be aware of them, especially as they present themselves. It's important to be able to distinguish between these feelings and authentic love. One is intrinsic to the body and particularly the brain, while the other is intrinsic to the soul. People often have misconceptions about love, thinking it's something that comes from outside of themselves, from others. They may expect love to look a certain way, and when it doesn't meet those expectations, they can feel controlled, victimized, or disappointed. This mindset can lead to unhealthy dynamics in relationships. In my quest to understand the true essence of love, I've encountered a troubling dogma that suggests love is something we receive from others. This belief can lead to a sense of control, as we expect others to love us in a specific way. When our expectations aren't met, we can feel victimized, as if the other person is responsible for our happiness. This mindset can create toxic relationships, where we relinquish our power and agency, and instead, rely on others to fulfill our emotional needs. To illustrate this point, consider the scenario of a breakup. When one person decides to end the relationship, the other may become resentful, feeling wronged because they weren't ready to let go. This resentment can lead some individuals to wish harm or misfortune upon the other person, simply because they didn't meet their expectations. In my perspective, this behavior is antithetical to love. True love is about embracing the other person's autonomy, allowing them to experience life on their own terms, even if that means leaving your life. It's about willingly letting go, with no attachment to the outcome, and genuinely wishing them well, even if it means they find happiness with someone else. Love is not about control or possession, it's about liberation and the sincere desire for the other person's joy, regardless of whether you're the source of it. I still acknowledge that jealousy is a natural human emotion, especially in the context of love. However, I firmly believe that humans have the capacity to transcend this limitation. The feelings we experience after a breakup, such as resentment, anger, and hatred, are not authentic or healthy. They stem from a place of hurt and attachment, rather than genuine concern for the other person's well-being. Why else would we wish harm or misfortune upon someone we once loved? This mindset is rooted in ego and possessiveness, rather than true love. If the person were to pass away, would we truly feel happy or relieved? No. This disparity highlights the importance of transcending our limitations and cultivating a more authentic, selfless form of love, one that wishes the best for the other person, even if it means letting them go. 13. 14. It's common to see people react with resentment or hostility when mentioning their ex after a breakup. They may even claim they'd rather die than reunite with their former partner. This reaction reveals that, despite our emotional growth, we still harbor primal feelings of attachment, hurt, and possessiveness. However, I remain optimistic that we can evolve beyond these limitations. By acknowledging and confronting these emotions, we can transcend them and develop a more mature, compassionate understanding of love. This allows us to genuinely wish our former partners well, even if we're no longer together. By doing so, we liberate ourselves from the shackles of resentment and anger, embracing a more enlightened, selfless form of love. What is love? Love is the willingness to let go of control, possession, and attachment, embracing the freedom and autonomy of oneself and one's partner. It's the ability to wish the best for the other person, even if it means they're no longer in your life. Love is about liberation, not limitation, compassion, not possessiveness, and selflessness, not selfishness. It's the courage to let someone go, knowing they may find happiness with someone else. In romantic relationships, love means embracing the present moment without expectations or demands, and accepting the beauty of impermanence. It's the understanding that true love is not about owning or being owned, but about being a source of joy, support, and growth for each other, without condition or attachment. One of the reasons why love seems so difficult to find is because we grasp on illusions. We grasp onto transient emotions thinking that it's love, and so it clouds us from going any deeper. Infatuation, attachment, lust and similar emotions become barriers to discovering the authentic love that lies dormant within us, and not only this, but we also tend to maintain several illusions concerning love, mostly conceptual constructs. So, when it comes to romantic relationships, we all have some fantasy of how our ideal partner will be or what a romantic relationship is supposed to look like, and a great deal of this comes from social conditioning. That's when the my type or not my type dynamic comes in. From television, music, literature and films. The whole media system can play a huge role in shaping our lifestyles even without us noticing. But often we find that after some time has passed, when the euphoria begins to fade off, and this is in part due to the brain no longer producing the chemicals which I spoke of earlier, but this also has a lot to do with our own projections. We then find out that the person is not who they initially appeared to be. They may fall short of some of our expectations, or worse, they may turn out to be quite the opposite of what we had imagined or expected them to be, so we find ourselves disappointed and even frustrated and gradually falling out of love. 14. 15. In this case, the problem isn't necessarily with the other person. However, the problem often lies within us and our imagination, our fantasy, our projections and expectations. We imagine what a perfect partner will be like and what a perfect relationship will be like, and we look for someone who seems to fit that ideal, and when we meet someone who comes close to that, we try to project that ideal to them. In some cases it seems to fit, but it may require that we exaggerate their desirable qualities while at the same time ignoring or downplaying their undesirable behavioral patterns. The other thing is that it takes time to really get to know someone, and in the initial phase there is so much we don't know about them, so we tend to fill those gaps with our own imagination because we are caught up in fantasy and imagination. We see everything through a narrow and clouded filter. We see only what we want to see and only what fits with our ideal and our imagined projections or expectations. Even if we reshape things a little, it's not entirely in our own head either. The other person is likely filtering their own behavior, giving you the best of themselves while hiding or downplaying their own imperfections. We want to please one another. We want to secure the other person. We tend to go all the way out of our way to be a little bit more desirable, a little more attentive and affectionate, a little more acceptable and pleasant, and to distract from any qualities that the other person might find displeasing or unattractive. Often, it is as if we are interviewing for a position, so we are on our best behavior. We want to convince the other that we are the best fit or most suited for that position, and so we put forth a little more extra effort to please. But once we secure that position, we start to get a little more comfortable. We gradually decrease that effort and our authentic temperaments fade out. Even if we can recognize in the beginning some of the undesirable qualities in the other person, we might do so with the expectation that these qualities are going to change over time. We might see someone as having a great potential, but the truth is that within each one of us lies enormous and unbounded potential, and well, everyone has this potential, and very few exercise it, so recognizing the undesirable qualities in this way is not acceptance. There is still a desire for the person to eventually change. This means that we do accept them as they are presently, we have this expectation for them to become something different, and the reality is that people seldom live up to our expectations. So in the beginning of the relationship there is so much illusion and so much fantasy, but we like that, it makes things exciting and passionate, but the problem with illusion is that it is very difficult to maintain. In the beginning we are trying to please one another whether we realize it or not. We are trying to keep that person's attention and interest, but once we feel like we have secured the relationship, we begin to relax, we begin to settle down and revert back to our regular way of behaving. This is when the relationship tends to become dull and dissatisfying. This is when tension and conflict begin to arise, and we think that the other person has changed, but really, they've just reverted back to their usual normal self. For a while they were just playing a game, likely and completely unaware of it, just as you are likely unaware of your own game. 15. 16. But now you are truly beginning to see one another more authentically. Also, your perspective is broadening, you are no longer focused primarily on the desirable qualities. Now you are noticing the flaws and imperfections. It might be that they are becoming harder and harder to ignore. And there is nothing wrong with this, but it seems like a drastic change because we compare that reality to the image we had of them, we compare to the fantasy which is now beginning to fade out. How to perfectly conduct ourselves in romantic relationships. We need to be very aware of the illusions that we hold concerning love relationships because this is what creates so much of the conflicts. We think that the other is to blame for not living up to our standards, not meeting our needs, but the truth of the matter is that they are not living up to our illusions and expectations, and it is not their responsibility to do so. These are your illusions, so you must recognize them and take responsibility for your disappointments, by taking responsibility for your expectations. It is at this point in a relationship when love is truly tested, because the illusions which we so often mistake for love are beginning to fade and they can't last. So, if there is no genuine love existing beneath them, then there is no real foundation for a healthy relationship, so the whole thing collapses. So if we want to have a relationship that is healthy and strong, we need to understand all of this. We need to take a realistic approach. We must understand the chemical influence, and like any drug it is going to fade at some point. So the question is, can we embrace the reality of love? Can we also appreciate the relationship in its authenticity? I'm not suggesting that the reality must be dull or bleak or boring. It usually appears that way because we compare it to the grandiose illusions we have about love. It only appears that way when it doesn't measure up to our expectations, so if we hold someone to an unrealistic ideal it's naturally going to disappoint us. But if we embrace the reality of the relationship and truly accept one another with gratitude and appreciation, we can love very deeply. There can be a real joy in the stability and consistency and familiarity. There can be a real lasting intimacy. Passion. We crave excitement, we want burning fiery passion, but if you want a fire that lasts all throughout a night, you don't put out the woods all at once. A fire that burns too hot dies out very quickly, and therefore so many relationships don't last very long. There can still be passion in a long-term relationship, but to expect passion at every moment is like expecting the sun to always shine, and that is total exaggeration. The problem is that passion naturally withers from relationships as they evolve. The problem is that we want passion all the time and more than we expect. We demand it, but what we fail to. 16. 17. Realizes that anything we do regular becomes regularly. In other words, if we are passionate all the time it would lose its excitement, it wouldn't be passion anymore. Passion is exciting because it is short-lived, it's infrequent, it arrives in waves rising and falling, but if we demand passion to remain in a state of constant consistency, we can end up killing it. Imagine there is a machine that can measure the frequency of relationship energy in waves, and the nature of the waves is that they rise and fall. So, if you get a peak, it is always followed by a trough, which is a low point equal to the amplitude of the peak. So the peak in this situation represents excitement and spontaneity, and the trough represents calmness and routine, and excitement and spontaneity are what creates a sense of passion. Calmness and routine are what we generally consider to be dull and uninteresting. And the higher the peak, the lower the trough. So, this means that if the passion is extremely hot it will likely be followed by extreme coolness, and if we crave passion very strongly then we have a tendency to resist excitement through tension and conflict. So in other words, a relationship that is extremely passionate is also likely to be extremely dramatic and unstable, and these kinds of relationships generally don't last very long. There is usually a lot of agitation, anger and fighting, which eventually leads to a sudden and dramatic breakup. Now, we don't want a flat line either, because that will mean that the relationship is dead. What we want is a healthy pose, a smooth fluctuation, so there will be times in every relationship when we feel really close and so connected, and there will be also times when we don't feel so close. There's also going to be times when feel that we need space. There's going to be times when we agree, and there's going to be times when we disagree. There's going to be things our partner does that we enjoy, and there will be things that irritates us. And as long as we impose our ideals and expectations upon one another, there will always be disappointment and tension, and therefore disharmony and imbalance. The key to maintain balance is to bring awareness to this illusion, to see them for what they are and then release them. Because perhaps then we can truly be present with the reality of the relationship, with the actual, instead of the imaginary. Then we can be in a space of acceptance and appreciation, and when we are in that space, there is so much more room for genuine love to blossom. They say love begins with you. In order to experience true divine love, you must first fall in love with yourself. 17. 18. Chapter 4. Self-love and true acceptance. The thing about love is that we have so many misconceptions. One's of that love requires certain conditions, but love which is genuine and authentic doesn't depend on any conditions whatsoever. That's why it is called unconditional love. This means that there's not a standard that one has to meet in order to be loved. It might seem like there is if you look at how people relate in the world these days, but much of what we call love is simply illusion. There are so many things that we mistake for love, and I'm not even going to go into details concerning all of that. And so, one of the reasons why we may find it so challenging to love ourselves is in part due to some of our misunderstandings pertaining love. We have all kinds of misconceptions. A lot of these ideas get in the way of authentic love. Another thing about love is that it has a great deal to deal with self-acceptance, and so, I would suggest for anyone who is struggling to love themselves to forget about the idea of love for a moment, because chances are your misinterpretation of the word might be getting in the way, hindering the real intricacies and true nature of love. So just put the idea completely aside for now, and instead focus your attention simply on self-acceptance. Self-acceptance simply means that whatever flaws we may have, whatever imperfections, weaknesses and so on, that we accept all of these about ourselves, and whatever judgment we are carrying regarding all of that, we let that go. The thing about judgment is that it's just an interpretation, which means that it is not entirely factual. In fact, sometimes it's false. Sometimes it's based on something factual, and so, it can be difficult to distinguish between facts and judgments. So, to give an example, if I make a mistake, that's a fact. If I think that I'm utterly useless because of that mistake, that's a judgment, that's a belief or an opinion, and it's not actually true. And the thing is, we have all kinds of negative self-judgments and limiting beliefs, all of which are untrue. I'm useless, I'm worthless, I can't do anything right, I'm not good enough, etc. All of these are beliefs and judgments, and as real as they might seem at times, they are not actually true. Most, if not all of them, are over-exaggerations. So, here's the thing, we all make mistakes, we all fail at something, we all have flaws and imperfections and so on. There's not one single person in this world that is perfect. It might seem like there are, or it might seem like some. 18. 19. People are better than others in some way, but really, we are all well balanced, meaning that we often have just as much strength as we all do have weaknesses, just as we have advantages we all have disadvantages and so on. So, a person who is well skilled in one area is probably very unskilled in several other areas. And so, there is no one in this world who measures up to every standard of perfection. So, let's not pretend that you don't have some flaws in your personality or your skill set, or your appearance, or whatever the case may be. In fact, you probably are aware of these imperfections. The question is, can you accept them? Can you accept the fact that you are not perfect? How to accept yourself as you are? Acceptance means that you can acknowledge these things without the other judgments. You can just notice and let the judgments go. You can see the imperfections and simply allow them to be there without any judgment. If you've spent your life judging yourself, condemning yourself, putting yourself down, what good has any of that done for you? Has it changed any of these things that you don't like about yourself? Has it fixed any of your flaws? Or has it caused you to feel miserable about yourself? In other words, that approach hasn't done anything to improve your life, it hasn't changed or resolved anything, so why not try something else? Why not shift from condemnation to acceptance? This means that we are not necessarily trying to change anything about ourselves, but only changing our attitude regarding these things. Secondly, stop comparing yourself to other people. You are not them, you are you and unique, and everyone is. We are all unique in our own way. We all have our own various gifts and talents, personalities, characteristics, temperaments, inclinations, and so on. It might seem that some people are better skilled at something than others, but there are also a countless number of areas where they struggle. Some people have all the looks, but they might not have all the intelligence to match their looks. Some people are talented in one area, but there are other things that they are terrible at. That's just how it is. No one is good at everything. We'll have our own flaws, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where did we get the idea that there is anything wrong with not being perfect? When we look at other people, it might seem like some are skilled at certain things or fortunate in some areas or confident in their abilities and so on, and maybe what they are good at is expressing the best qualities without letting their imperfections stand in the way. What I mean is that some people simply focus more on what they have rather than what they lack. They focus on what they are naturally good at, rather than on what they do poorly. They focus on the best qualities rather than the worst qualities, and so, the best qualities tend to be outstanding and they outshine their imperfections. 19. 20. So, this is something we all need to learn to do as well. While we all have flaws and imperfections, we all have positive qualities as well. We'll have areas where we are skilled at something. We all have virtues that are deeply valuable. But when we are too much focused on imperfections, we tend to overlook these positive aspects and qualities, even to the extent that sometimes we don't even see them at all. And again, it's not about pretending that we don't have flaws. We still recognize them, but without the judgment, just recognizing the imperfections as they are and without being ashamed of them, because that's just a part of being human, and with the same attention we recognize our positive qualities that we all have. Awakening discernments. So, take time to recognize your own flaws and qualities, recognize how valuable they are, learn to appreciate them, and give your attention to cultivating and expressing them. Another thing is, don't be so dependent upon the opinions of others. A lot of judgments we have about ourselves are other people's judgments, and we tend to build our sense of worth and self-esteem on what others think of us. But the truth is that it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks of us. What really matters is how we think of us. We can't even have a clear perspective of ourselves if it is clouded by other people's opinions, so we need to put all of that aside and simply see ourselves just as we are without all the other judgments. We might also have judgments about ourselves relating to whether certain people like us or not. What that really means is that we are dependent upon others to validate us, and to accept and approve of us. If they don't like us, we tend to interpret this as an indication that there is something wrong with us. Maybe there is something wrong with them. Do you ever consider that? Maybe it's not you. The thing is, our value doesn't depend on whether other people recognize it or not. Some people are simply incapable of recognizing that. The problem is that we assess our own value based upon what other people think of us, whether they see any value in us or not. Really, we just need to recognize our value independent of what anyone thinks, says, or does. If you have any qualities which are valuable, if you have any skills or talents, knowledge, or wisdom, kindness and compassion and so on. These things have value regardless of whether anyone else recognizes them or not. The question is, do you recognize them? That's really all that matters. When we talk about loving ourselves, what this means is that we are not depending on anyone else to love us, we are not depending upon anyone to assess our value or to tell us what to do or not, but we are recognizing the value which already lies within us. We are giving our attention to those qualities and virtues and appreciating them, cultivating and expressing them. You may be struggling to accept your physical appearance and so on, and so, you end up hating and despising yourself because you think you are not beautiful or handsome enough. 20. 21. In the pursuit of validation, we often find ourselves trying to change our appearance to fit someone else's ideal or seeking acceptance from society or specific groups. We crave the satisfaction that comes with being liked and accepted, even if it means hiding our true selves. But is this really worth the cost? Defining our beauty by a false appearance may bring temporary relief or satisfaction, but deep down, we know it's not authentic. We're neglecting our true selves to feed our false selves. We can deceive our false selves, but we can't deceive our inner truth. Why do we prioritize others' opinions over our own self-acceptance? Is it worth going the extra mile to impress others with a facade, knowing it's not genuine? Our true appearance, with all its uniqueness and imperfections, is what makes us beautiful. Embracing our authenticity is the key to true satisfaction and self-love. Let's break free from the need for external validation and focus on cultivating self-acceptance. Our true beauty shines when we embrace our individuality, rather than trying to conform to someone else's standards. It's time to celebrate our authentic selves, imperfections and all. Now the whole process of shifting our attention in this way may take some time of practice. We may have to keep reminding ourselves of our virtues and abilities, that other people's opinions are just opinions, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of us. We may have to keep reminding ourselves that despite all the flaws we may be possessing, no one is perfect, but we all have something of value to offer. Learning to love yourself is a process of removing the barriers which stand in the way of love, removing the false and limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves, the judgments and the shame and so on, shifting our focus onto those things which we can appreciate about ourselves. All of these take time and attention, so be patient with that process, but most importantly be patient with yourself, be gentle, be kind to yourself, be forgiving, and be accepting. Learn to accept yourself just as you are.